Well, I might get some someday. Okay, this is traditionally the time for you to turn the wheel of Dharma with your questions, observations, sharing. What are you curious about in the Dharma? I used to say to my students at Portland State University, I taught there for a long, long time, different classes, I would say, you know, first of all, I want to let you know there are no dumb questions. People would say, well, maybe this is a dumb question. There aren't any, especially in Dharma. And sometimes when we've been doing it a long time, we have a question that may seem too basic, like, oh, I don't want to reveal. I have those kind of questions almost every day when I practice. I go, what is that I've been saying for 20 years? What does that mean? You know? And then we get too embarrassed to bring them forth, but please, anything. Because it will benefit somebody. Yeah, Susan. And we need to use the microphone. And please turn the green button. Yeah, thanks. Carolyn.
I read a quote yesterday by the Dalai Lama that I'm sitting with, and I'm wondering if anybody else has seen this quote and what you would do with it. And it was said in 1993 is how I'm remembering what it said. And he said, compassion is not enough. It needs to be taken into action.
What do you think that means? You've been thinking about it and working with it, I know, for quite a while.
Oh no, I'm continually working with it because for me it's the piece of engagement, and it's basically being active in the world and the injustices that I often do not personally experience, but I do know that they're there. Mm-hmm. And I'm aware for myself, I definitely became less directly engaged in things because I get so reactive, and often the things that I had been involved with in terms of political things, they really felt like that they were reactive. I mean, we had a wonderful vision, but I felt like the way it always got translated in was always reaction. Anyways, I just wonder.
Well, first, thank you for that question. I wonder too. Like you, actually, we met in those days of political activism, pre-Buddhism. I've had the same experience as you, Susan, that many years of protest and education on certain issues and trying many, many things, from occupying the freeway and shutting it down to, quote, end the, a little spider, to end the Vietnam War. So, you know, up to being a lawyer for protesters. And I also felt at the end of that burned out and somewhat discouraged, but also could see the goodness in it, the goodness of our wish for the end of suffering in the world. I didn't have that language then. I didn't know what I was aiming for, but it was good to get that language. So when the Dalai Lama says compassion is not enough, first, what I do is I turn to, well, what's the definition of compassion? It's the wish to end the suffering. That's important to know. The wish to end suffering. So it's one of the four immeasurables, right? It's very important to know our definitions. So of course the wish isn't enough, but the wish is crucial, because it's back to the thing I read out at the Book of Joy. It's connected to the view. So we want to get our view very clear. And that view is the wish to end suffering for all beings, none excepted. So to me, who was an activist for many years, what was not quite working about it that you call reactive, I experienced that too. There was a lot of anger at some other. When I was a socialist, it was at the ruling class, right? So they're causing all the suffering. Well, later, you meet some rich people and they're suffering. You go, well, that's interesting. Who's causing all this? And you just keep working on it. But I started to see the limited view of I am standing up for a certain group of people. At that time, the working class. We used to be able to talk about that in this country. It was okay to say that there was classism and class differences. It's still okay, but not in the news, not in the general media, because you get accused of creating division, as though you create the division by referring to the division. But at any rate, I was standing up for my people. I mean, I grew up with what are called the working poor. You work all the time, you're still poor. You don't own your houses generally. You might have a car that you all share. No one goes to college. You don't get your teeth fixed. I didn't have a dentist till I was 18. It's just, there's just these indicators of the class situation. So I came out with a lot of energy, a lot of anger, and a lot of activity. And I also saw that that wasn't enough, and yet the wish to end suffering is also not enough, right? Because it's a wish. But it's crucial to have it, the wish to end suffering for every single being. I started seeing, then I became a lawyer for Black United Front and Black United Fund and some other groups, the Arab Students Union at Portland State, and just on and on, all the ism type situation. And I started seeing, as I would negotiate or oppose the other side, real humans over there also suffering, mostly suffering from tremendous obliviousness and ignorance. Didn't even have an idea that what they were doing caused anyone suffering. So that was a wake-up call. So I think I'm just laying out how I've kind of figured it out, and I'm really interested in other people's comments. But where I've come to now is this wish to end the suffering of all beings, the four immeasurables, the wish that all beings have happiness. Those are crucial views to take into the world. And probably one of the most powerful is the immeasurable of equanimity. This is what the Dalai Lama starts almost all of his talks with, we all want our suffering to end. We all want happiness. This is the way we are the most alike as humans. So in that, I am just like Idi Amin or Hitler or Trump or the Dalai Lama or Desmond Tutu. We have that. That's our basic goodness in there. And then what I think your question looks at is how we go about it. That's strategy. So first you have view, then you have strategy. This is from my own leftist training. And then you have tactics. The tactics are, I'm going to share this cup with you. That's the tactic. The strategy could be, I want to connect. I want to practice generosity. But my view is, we are so same. We are so same. Way so same. Like, way so same that as we practice the view, there isn't any other. I give you that because I need to give. So I benefit, you benefit from whatever it is. So same. We so need each other to do these practices. So then you go to the tactics, like, do I go to the march? What's the march about? I'm just using this as one example. So recently, I left the middle of some talks in a protest downtown. I went and I thought, I'm just going to keep watching my mind. Watch my mind, watch my mind. I want to be here to stand up and show up for this issue. This was the one about the oil pipeline across the Native American land. And there were some other folks here from the center, which was nice. And we all stood together. And the first part of it was so lovely. It felt very uplifting, the march, short march to the park blocks, and the first talks by the Native American people were quite uplifting. And then someone stood up, invited, because the protocol now at these marches is you have to have a representative from each of the oppressed groups. And so and this has been the protocol for 25 years. And so you don't leave anyone out. So you have gay and lesbian people for the Native American people, or African American for the Native people, or women's rights people for the Native people. And it's kind of a great idea. But about the third or fourth speaker, it started going into that anger and a them and us. And I felt myself, both feeling upset, angry, etc. And I just turned to one of the friends standing there and said, I feel ready to go because this is the tone I don't support. And he said, yeah, let's get out of here. Now it's Jeff Gunn. And off we went, walked across the bridge, had a good talk about it, got centered again. So that's a tactic. That's to the level of the momentary decision. This is not easy, For someone else, the tactic is going to be sitting in your room and doing metta, sending loving kindness to everyone. That's going to be your tactic. Great. That's activism. That's activism. We don't have to be moving our body around. Because by doing that, the next time you get up and you go somewhere, you're going to carry that loving kindness to that situation, which might be something in Fred Meyer with a parent being nasty to a kid. And I found one day I was able, because of Buddhism, to go up and simply say to this mother, just smiling at her and saying, your child is so cute. And it just snapped something. I mean, between them, and the little one started relaxing and kind of running around. Whatever the fight was over, he forgot. He was like 2 or 3. And she was just like, oh, yeah, huh. And I could not do that every time I saw that, but I could. I just felt some kind of opening and was able. I looked at them for a while and thought, yeah, I can do that. I'll try it. What's the worst thing going to do? She's going to yell at me and say, mind your own business. And I'm going to say, okay, sorry. Big deal. Run the experiment, as Bill says. So also on our, this was the other trap, at least a lot of us lefties, activists fell into, was that we'd set out these view, strategy, tactics, and then we wouldn't be flexible. It was like, no, that's the strategy, and you apply it no matter what's happening. Well, flexibility. And that's what I think Dharma brings too. So compassion is not enough, and I immediately think of the wisdom has to come along. That wisdom of interconnectedness and the wisdom of seeing, just like we do in here with all of our sitting, seeing what's going on in my mind right now. Uh-oh, I'm going south, or I'm getting really angry. I'm not of use here right now. Better to back off, go away, or stand in a corner and say mantra, or there's all kind of tactics. So, yeah, Mary.
So this really, I'm glad this is coming up, because I think like a lot of people, I've kind of struggled with this stuff over the last year, but I've been fortunate in the work I've done, and then in some recent travels, actually, to come in contact with people with very different views, and able just to be with them in a friendly and kind way without necessarily bringing all of that up. And I think that for me, the first step is just to see that they are just like me.
Yeah.
And because I think it seems pretty obvious to me that the road of division that we've gone on is not helpful. It just makes it a bigger ravine between us. And like you, if certain things just make me more angry, I know I can't work effectively from that place as a Buddhist practitioner or any type of practitioner. And it's just been kind of startling. And I've also been trying to see that there's a lot of people that thought differently about things and however we think things changed. But it would be foolish of me to not at least try to see some of that. Like, why do you think that way? Mm-hmm. And just as a little something I'm going to be looking at a little bit too. I've listened to a podcast called On Being. Some people may have heard of. And she interviewed somebody named Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, who is like a social scientist and coming from a liberal background. But it was kind of revealing. He talked about him trying to understand conservatism. Yeah. Because it's actually a whole way of thinking that they think of that, authority should be respected and that there's boundaries and there's a lot of different things that the left is very far from. So I'm gonna read some of his books to kind of, because he's grappling with this, and how he's kind of had some aha moments too. So that's just how I'm trying to make this journey. That's difficult, but I know that I don't know everything, and just because I think something doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the components of compassion, obviously, but we stumble over it, is understanding. So if I don't understand my brother or brother-in-law, who are, Trump supporters, then I can't even talk with them. And so going in there with a sense of there's something here for me to learn And then I watch my reactivity just blindside me. Then I know, okay, I don't have the patience for this right now. So with both of them, there's pretty much an agreement right now. We'll be together. We love each other. We make that clear. And we say, I love you when we come, we hug. We say, I love you when we leave, we hug. And we don't talk politics. But I learn about the rest of their lives. And then, especially my brother will kind of float little things, like kind of testing the temperature. You know, like NAFTA, da-da-da. And I have to look and say, am I going to take that one? But I'll often just find, now here's a tactic. I'll find, where do we agree? Yeah, that agreement was not helpful for most people. Then I wait, and he'll sometimes be surprised I agree with anything. So then he drops it. But, you know, these are all tactical moments but what's guiding me most of the time, except when I lose it, is the view. And a really helpful piece of that is going in there, saying to myself, as strongly as I can, my purpose here is to help my brothers come to full awakening, period. There can't be any other purpose, like I want them to like Obama, or I want them to see my side of it, or I have to drop all that and just say, that's my only reason for being here. And that's the big strategy. And then if my tactics can line up with that, which that's the hard part. Because mostly, if he brings it up, I just want to scream at him and run, and I already did that. My brother-in-law threw me out of the dinner table, so we've already done all that. It's kind of amazing we still get together. We've been through all that. And like you said, that it just grew the gap, and it didn't work. So let's hear if there's anything Bill or Dora would like to share with this, because it's so important to all of us right now.
Well, you talked a little, going back to the beginning of the question, about how you would offer a definition of compassion as the wish to free all beings from suffering. There's another word in the question, which was action, or there's another word there, and it's interesting for me to look at that word and how quickly we go to different kinds of definitions for what action would be. And if we step back from the kind of the immediate pressure to think in terms specifically only of politics and issues that are arising in kind of that are very topical in the news, action takes a much broader, it's a much broader scope. And I think it's very important from a Buddhist perspective not to single out simply one kind of action and feel sort of pressured into thinking that's the real action, and the other actions, the other ways of engaging with all the different kinds of suffering there are lesser, or and there's I think a very real pressure to think in those ways, that if you're not engaged in particular kind of action with a particular kind of theory about it, you're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something that is very important, because for some reason I'm thinking about Jan Willis's talk the other night when she spoke about the way that the Buddha was engaged from the very beginning, just by sitting down in the forest and welcoming people from all castes to come, and heaven forbid, even women. Howbeit, imperfectly in many ways. We can look back in history and point out all our collective imperfections in history, but these are very radical things, just to sit with people of all kinds. And that to me is that's kind of a good starting point for me to think about this. And I too can I watch my mind race and engage in all kinds of battles. As I like to talk, I talk to myself and think, how clever am I that I've come up with another clever thing that would really get under somebody's skin if I could just, get in the right situation and get in their face and say it just the right way. I'm sure it would take care of everything.
Yeah, they would instantly agree with you.
They would put their tail between their legs and feel so ashamed, and just everything would be better after that. So I do all that, but I think there is something that we can do as Buddhists to kind of we have all kinds of tools at our disposal from what we've learned and ways that we do and analyze things. But I think it's very important to keep separate kind of our secular tools and recognize the origins of those secular tools and the purposes of those secular tools and the limitations thereof. If secular tools alone had really a good shot at working over history,
we'd be there.
There were very smart people a very long time ago, and they would have nailed it, and we'd be done with all this stuff now. But that simply has not happened. And there is something, I think, in looking at the persistence of conflict in history that we actually, in order to avoid burnout, we actually have to have a much deeper sense of what we need to do, a much a kind of longer term perspective, so that we can engage with the difficulties that evolve from one kind of difficulty, and then the solution to the last difficulty becoming the cause of the next difficulty. That we need to be able to be flexible and ready to roll with these things for our entire life, and to prepare others to continue to engage in that way in their lives to come. So there's something, I think, that I think your experiments of going and engaging in the ways that you do are really good examples of seeing what it's like, what the possibilities are, but also what the limitations are, and particularly to see what our personal limitations are. And I think it's also good not just to think about our limitations, but about what we're actually capable of doing, what our positive capacity is, and find ways to really engage that and keep challenging ourselves to be in contact with situations that are not just comfortable to be, and they come up. We don't actually really have to run around and look for them. They do seem to walk up. So to be willing to step into those and see how our practice emerges in those things, I think it's important. So I would say that there's a much bigger scope to the word action than just what we might zero in on in terms of political action and a particular style of political action. And one thing that I do like to say is that one of the problems that we have here is that we're probably far too like-minded. And it's easy to step into just a certain way of encouraging ourselves to subtle aggression by all agreeing about what the problem is and who the problem is and all those kinds of things. And so I think in that, I think it's necessary to have a kind of humility that even if I got the wish that my mother instilled in me when she would say, well, if I was Tsarina, then she would say the thing that she would do that would solve everything. So even if we were czar or czarina and had a certain kind of secular omnipotence, it's the seconds until we started to screw up big time.
Yeah.
It's to have some sense of humility about that and some sense of patience and deep open-heartedness so we can be with all these things. We can make our mistakes and learn from them and keep going and keep deepening. So I think it's very important. The action piece, I think, is very important because that will take us to a point where we really see things, start to learn things, and can actually be a benefit. So.
Yeah, and so everything we do, everything we think, say, or do in the day, thinking is action too in Buddhism. Thinking gathers karma, it's action. So whether you're even making your dinner for someone, that's a moment that can be mind training. So, we're always training the mind, whether you're sitting at home making food, going to the market, going to work, going to a protest, or choosing not to go, or not even being interested in that in any way. That's all right. It's all mind training, and I think all the comments are pointing towards the same thing, that gap. And it's always wherever you go, there you are. And there your distress is, there your confusion is. And that, for me, was the missing piece in my whole life, not just activism, but family, relationships, was, I start to see I'm bringing something to the party that's not so helpful, not so clear, not so kind, not so inclusive. So, what else?
I have a question about having a dull mind.
Dull?
Dull, yeah. So sometimes when I practice, that's what I notice is a feeling of dullness and like I'm not falling asleep, but my awareness feels just really flat and I don't know how to describe it, but I wonder what that is and what is that a problem?
No, nothing's a problem. If we say it's a problem, now we've added something on to what's happening. Okay, so let's start there. Something's happening. Then if we say it's like this, it's like that, it's a problem, then you see you've added a layer of stress, kind of. So I'll just say a couple of things that come to mind. First, it's good you see it. So encourage yourself. I see it. You could have spent your whole life in it and never seen it. That's really, really important to go, wow, I'm seeing this. This is a pattern that shows up for me. And then I always think of the first Lama who said, I thought it was very funny at the time, but only later saw how kind and insightful it was. He said, when you sit, whoever shows up, set up a nice tea table. Welcome them in. Let them dance. I like that. Let them dance before you. They're just dancing. You don't need to get up and dance with them. You don't have to grab them. You don't have to push them away. You just go, interesting dance. That gives you a little bit of space between whatever it is. Dullness, craving. Mine's always excitement. Very hard. My mind does that thing that they talk about when you first sit down. It's like a rushing waterfall. And you go, wow, sitting in calm abiding really doesn't work. My mind's worse than ever. But it's not. You're just seeing what it's always doing. Then it calms to a river. Then it can go at times into the ocean. That often is the time of danger for dullness. After all the rushing, the nice calm ocean. Almost asleep, like we say. So the other thing is to know those stages, so just be there for everyone. It's not like we conquer them at one point and the waterfall will never come again. Next session, it might be all waterfall. But when it calms to the point of some nice space, there is this habit that can rise of fog and sleepiness, and you just drifted for 20 minutes and your bell goes off and you go, wow, where was I? So these short sessions are a really good antidote to that. So I really liked what Sally shared yesterday, that metaphor of for 3 minutes, you're going to carry a very hot cup of brimming tea across us. I don't know if you said this, but this was my image, across a slippery floor. So, and you don't want to spill a drop. Trala Rinpoche does the metaphor of hot boiling oil up to the edge of the cauldron, and your job is don't spill one drop. So you do that kind of intensity. Now, the trick is, when I do that, I'm stressed right away. I'm like so stressed. But work with that. Okay, set the table. The stress showed up. Hello. The anxiety showed up. Hello. But I'm still focused on not spilling a drop in a relaxed way. Imagine that. And relaxed will be the only way you won't spill the drop. You can, if we nurture the anxiety, boom. So you do that for 3 minutes. Trala Rinpoche says 3 minutes with that intensity. And what's the metaphor for not spilling a drop is I'm on my object. Or if you're meditating with no object, I'm doing that. I'm not drifting. Then you drop it all. Don't try anything. Don't even meditate. Look around a little, take some breaths, relax. And at some time, even in that first minute, generally the sense rises, I want to get back there. I want to try again. Back to the boiling oil. This will help. I found this quite useful on the 1-year retreat when I just didn't understand much of what I was supposed to be doing, reading him and finding that peace. So that could help. But you have to do it. And the other thing I want to say to people is we have such expectations for our sessions. And you know what we don't do? I'm talking to myself here, but it might resonate with you. We don't set the conditions during the day for this to happen. We listen to loud music and a lot of news while we drive our car, and we don't leave time so that we have to rush, and we don't leave enough time, and so we're 5 minutes late, and we run into the building and we grab coffee, and we have these words, run and grab. I'll run to the store. My friends say that, and now I'm saying, no, just go to the store. I will grab a cup of coffee. No, just make the cup of coffee and enjoy it, but decaf would be better. And so we do all that, and then we think we're going to sit down and be calm. My God. My friend used to say, I don't know if you know the word cockleburr. It's kind of a Montana. Cockleburrs were these little things, if you went into the woods, they stuck on your pants, especially in the fall. And she would say, don't go in the woods with a mohair sweater on. And mohair was quite popular then. And so, I mean, you know, if you go in the woods with a mohair sweater, all those are going to stick to you. So that's what we do all day. And then we sit down going, I'm going to be calm. And we're just full of, not really. It's kind of good to calm and simplify life also as a basis. Thank you. Thank you. Let's dedicate our positive potential for the benefit of all. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you so very much. See you Wednesday for Chenrezig, or Thursday for mind training, or Saturday for Bill's class, or next Sunday. Have a good week.
Or even tonight.
Or tonight for 6:30 meditation. Yes.